Hello there. Dr. Bill Crawford here, psychologist, speaker, author of 8 books, host of 2 PBS specials. Here again to bring you another tip on how to help you create the life you want. Specifically, how to use my life from the top of the mind philosophy to bring more clarity, confidence, creativity into everything you do. Today I want to talk about fear of failure. This is a big problem for just a whole bunch of folks. And it's funny because I don't think many people think that fear of failure is a really good idea. I mean, if you were to ask someone, hey, do you think people ought to be really, really afraid of failure? Most people would say no. And yet it is so common. So what I like to do is look at a situation, okay, when something really doesn't make sense, why are we still doing it? Why is it so common? And for those of you who follow my life from the top of the mind philosophy, you know actually this has something to do with how the brain processes information. If you remember, we got these 3 parts of the brain, lower 20% of the brain, brainstem, fight or flight part of the brain. Middle brain is called the limbic system. This is the scanner, processor, router part of the brain. It scans the environment or thoughts that pop into our head and labels them, interprets them as either positive, neutral, or negative. If it interprets it as negative, it sends it down to the lower brain. If it interprets it as positive or neutral, it sends it up to the upper 80% of the brain, the neocortex, what I call the top of the mind, where we have access to our interpersonal skills, problem-solving skills, clarity, confidence, creativity, compassion, etc. So what we need to understand is what's going on with this middle brain. Its mission on the planet is to keep us safe, and it keeps us safe by keeping us worried about not being safe. Now, this worked really well when we were walking through the jungle and we heard the roar of a saber-toothed tiger. Middle brain, limbic system freaked out. We ran away. We were safe. If we were in the village and we noticed that some people wanted to throw us out of the village, and we knew that we couldn't survive if we got thrown out of the village, then that fear of bad things happening kicked in and we were able to maybe do something about that. So in the past, this fear of not being safe and using worry to keep us safe has kind of evolved into using fear of failure or worry to keep us successful. And unfortunately, this was probably reinforced by certain adults when we were growing up, people who loved us, wanted us to do the best and be successful, our parents, our teachers. I mean, how many of you were taught to fear making a bad grade in order to study so that we made a good grade? Or that we got into the college we wanted, or that we got rewarded by our parents or our teachers and seen as somebody that they loved, which is understandable because on some level it works. When we use fear of failure to motivate ourselves to study, and then we study, well, we probably will do pretty well on that test. But what that does is it reinforces fear of failure as a way to success. Now, we didn't always think this way. We weren't born this way. Up till age probably, 1.5, 2, just about when we started to learn to walk. Have you noticed when babies are learning to walk, fear of failure is not an issue they're dealing with? They pull themselves up and they fall down, but they don't see that as a failure. They don't lay there and go, oh my goodness, I'm so embarrassed, I'll never walk again. I'll just worm around on the floor for the rest of my life. They also don't blame the environment. It's this floor. Well, that's why I can't walk. Who's in charge of this floor? Because there is no fear of failure there. They see what isn't working, their failures, as part of a learning process. They pull themselves up and they recognize that they've leaned too far this way, they fall over. They pull themselves up and don't lean this too far this way, and they notice if they lean too this far this way, they fall over. It becomes a learning process because fear of failure isn't in the way. It isn't part of the process. Eventually, we learn to kind of balance based on what we've learned, taking what we've learned and applying it to what we want to achieve. That's a whole different process than using fear of failure to become successful. Because even if it's somewhat successful, in other words, if we do whatever we need to do to be successful, again, what we've done is reinforced fear of failure as a way to do it. And so the next thing that comes along, we got to worry about that. And all of a sudden we spend a lot of our time worried about failure and then maybe have this spike of success. But then the next thing comes along, we got to worry about that. And we spend way more time worried. Now, worry and fear and anxiety and stress and frustration and anger and resentment are all brainstem responses. They're chemical changes in our brain and body, adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol, that put us in that fight or flight situation. The problem is they trigger stress hormones. The most popular of these, the biggest one of these, is cortisol. Cortisol then triggers the production of glucose, because in a fight or flight situation, glucose is where we get our energy. And now we're sitting here producing more cortisol and glucose in non-fight or flight situations. We're almost having to go through the brainstem to get up into the neocortex, where we learn something and where we succeed. I suggest we look at that differently. Number one, we recognize that fear of failure is not something we need to hold on to. It is something we've learned, so we want to put a new belief in its place. That I have learned a whole lot of things in my life. I am capable of learning. If there's something that's important to me, I can learn it, and I can learn it faster by engaging this upper 80% of the brain, this clear, confident, creative part of who I am. Plus, when I want to use this knowledge, I can access that knowledge because it is in the upper 80% of the brain. It's not here, down here in the brainstem. So fear of failure doesn't really serve us anymore, and I suggest we don't use it as a way to be successful, as a way to create the life we want. I suggest instead we do something that we would recommend to someone we love. You know, we wouldn't recommend them going through life fearing failure as a way of success. We would want them to draw upon the best of who they are and bring that to life. That's what I do. I get to go around the world helping organizations and people kind of recognize how the brain processes information and how to access the clarity, confidence, and creativity by accessing a specific part of the brain, and how to avoid the stress, frustration, anxiety, resentment, fear, worry, depression that gets in the way of our success by avoiding a specific part of the brain. If you'd like me to come and do that with your organization, all you got to do is go to my website, billcrawfordphd.com, or just Google Bill Crawford PhD. I'll come up on the first page. Hit the contact button, let me know what you're interested in. If you're liking these videos, please hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe to them on YouTube. Follow me on Facebook. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I put these on iTunes. I try to put them pretty much everywhere. If you're enjoying them, share them with your friends if you feel it's valuable, because I'm having a wonderful time bringing them to you. I hope you're finding them valuable. So, in the meantime, here's to you, bringing more clarity, confidence, creativity to everything you do. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.